What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about 37-inch tires. I've seen a lot of videos all over where they talk about how to fit 35s, and even then they still don't really talk about some of the things that I feel should be talked about and addressed before jumping into actually going into bigger tires. So with that said, I want to talk about my specific setup as far as the 37s, what I had to do in order to make them fit and run both the front and the rear, because the rear has to be addressed as well, and what are some of the pros and cons, as well as talking about what can rub, what won't rub, as well as what specific application it can be used for without rubbing. So with that said, I want to start off with addressing the front. So this looks very customized, because it is. If you compare this to what a regular Tacoma would have, you would have all of this right here still follows this contour right here, as well as this portion right here, which, as you can see, has been completely cut out. And this is the pinch weld area, as well as the cab mount area. I've had a cab mount chop, not relocated, but just a cab mount chop, and I've had to do it at least 2 times in order for it to clear. The first time was good enough for 33-inch tires, but as you can see, the first one kind of followed this. The second one kind of made this deeper, and those were to fit the 35-inch tires. That didn't need to be addressed when I came to the 37s, because of something that I'm going to show you here very shortly, which is the JD Fabrication pivot kit. So as you can see there, the pivot kit allows you to move basically your lower control arms at least 1 inch forward. And as you can kind of see right there, those are some of the spacers that are right there in between. And you can go to 1/4 increments each to your desire or where you want it to be. So you could obviously move it up to 1 inch overall, on top of the actual lower control arms, which originally it already comes at least 1 inch forward. So I don't have it all the way forward. I think I have about 3 spacers that are in there, because of the fact that if I had pushed it a little bit more forward, you could see here some of the markings here that I still get kind of, and a little bit on the coils right there, but that's as much rubbing as I'm gonna get with that, which I'm totally fine with, and that's through an off-road application as well. So that's just one of the options that you could do to clear the 37s. This is very extensive work, because if you know what's inside here, this is where the windshield wiper reservoir is at. In order for me to make this happen, this needed to be cut out and relocate the windshield wiper reservoir a little bit more upwards. Well, it's definitely not going to clear the hood, so I had to get a custom windshield wiper reservoir, which is a little less than half the size of the OEM, which to me was not a big deal because who cares? I'll just have to settle with less windshield wiper fluid. And on this side, it is pretty much the same, as you can see there. A little bit more tubbing here on this side because this is really where it rubs, but it's pretty much the same all the way around, as you can see. It's been cut out here as well as here, and obviously making space right here, and that's where the battery sits. But it was cut in a way where it really wouldn't interfere so much with the battery. It just moved it up, and it still, you know, obviously closes. I didn't relocate the battery in the back. I did consider doing that, but really you won't need to if you're gonna go up to about 39-inch tires. If I went and got 39-inch tires from BFG, I do believe I'm going to clear this completely because it's only going to add about an inch or so, right, with 39-inch tires, because especially with the BFGs, because they're not really true 39s, I would still clear it. But I'm pretty satisfied with the 37s. Who knows, maybe in the future I will change that. Another thing I didn't address was this fender cut right here. And this fender cut was actually done prior to even fitting the 37. So like I mentioned earlier, that's one of the first things I actually addressed. Even with 35s at the time, I was pretty much rubbing all over it. So the modification included having to cut this inside as well as the outside fender, and then cutting my bumper off to make sure it wasn't rubbing, because it used to be like right about here, I believe. It was more like towards this way, straight. So obviously I needed to have that cut. I still wanted to keep obviously the structure of the bumper, so I left most of that off. I didn't want to have it cut all the way through where then it's just naked kind of right there, which won't have that support. So I had that done as well. And the rear is not so much. When I got this bumper, I've already had a fender cut previously. So when I got my rear bumper from Brute Force Fab, I sent them a picture and told them where I cut it, and Billy just eyeballed it and kind of knew already where it was going to land. He's like, nope, it's good enough. And man, I can't even complain. It looks like it's, I mean, it's pretty straight. It's where it needs to be, where I cut it. So in order for this to clear, obviously you needed to cut this as well. And that's pretty much all I really needed to do in the rear to clear the 37s. However, actually, let me take that back. The one thing I needed to do, and if you've been watching me both on Instagram and YouTube, you're aware that I've had some issues before in the past, actually in the last few months, where I had to get new spacers, because what happened was the previous spacer brand that I used to have, I'm not gonna name them, but they basically broke off where the studs were. So actually it wasn't the actual OEM studs, which I thought would have been the culprit of this thing, but it was actually the spacer studs that broke off. And I had them torqued, you know, according to their torque specs, but it just didn't really work out well. It broke off while I was in Big Bear. It flew off. And the reason why I have spacers to get to that point is because of these shocks. The shocks, actually, you can kind of see where it rubs off right there a little bit. When it articulates up and down, not so much up, I mean down, more up. When it articulates up, it tends to rub the tires against this. And again, that can be done, as you know, I'm not going to talk about wheel spacing or whatnot, but you know, you can address that through different offsets, which would allow you to have it stick out more, which would prevent you from rubbing. It also depends on your tire choice. For 37s, these are actually looking kind of pretty skinny, even though they are 12.5 inches wide. And that's the width that I have on it. But with that said, it's still rubbed. Even though I previously had 1.25 and 1.25 spacers, and so I ended up having to go with 1.5 inch spacers. The 1.25s were the spider tracks, and they worked perfect. But again, they were rubbing because, you know, once you go wider, it's going to start to rub. So I had to go at least another 1/4 of an inch outwards to prevent rubbing. But those spacers were terrible. They broke off, and I am now running 2-inch spacers from Bora, and so far so good. I torqued them to the specs, took this to the Rubicon, no issues at all, so highly recommend them if you're gonna go with any type of spacers, because they do mention that you go a certain amount of inches in there and it might not be good. These are 2-inch spacers. They work just fine for me, and I wheeled this pretty hard at the Rubicons with no issues. So if you were to get spacers and you want to go over 1 1/4, I would recommend the Bora spacers. So that is pretty much it. That is what I had to do in order for me to clear the 37s, and even for this matter, even 35s. But yeah, I off-road this and I don't get any rubbing. You know, there's no rub marks anywhere. You know, that's just dirt and stuff like that. But you know, so far, I mean, it's worked out pretty well for me. And as I mentioned earlier, there are ways for you to address rubbing issues and things of that nature. However you see it fit. There are a lot of other options out there. Right now, the biggest thing that you see in the market, which is very expensive, is through portal axles. 37s, I believe you have minimal cutting that you're going to need, but even then, because 37-inch tires on a portal axles is still pretty much, you know, a bigger tire. I do believe that they mentioned you have to still do some trimming in the cab mount area, some hammering of the pinch weld. That is one issue that obviously it's not too much of a lift. I don't think it's pretty understandable. It's pretty easy to do. A lot of people do it, offer services for it, so a lot of people really are intrigued by the portal axles. The problem is the price, right? You know, you're seeing a bunch of them out there now, like the Wolfworks portals, which I think they run for about 15 grand for the Tacomas and the 4Runners, and other Toyota platforms. And then right now, what's kind of catching everybody's attention obviously is the 74 weld, but they come pretty hefty too. They're about 20K for the total complete kit for portal axles for 74 weld, if you want to run them on Tacomas or 4Runners. But other options out there as well would be the RCLT kit, which is a lower control arm that moves it forward, I believe 2 inches, is by Marlin Crawler, and I've seen a couple of those kits, and it's really nice how it's so pushed forward that it's easier to have a better approach angle when you're coming up on a rock. However, they do run a different steering rack. The one I have is a modified Tundra steering rack, which is a little bit different from the Land Cruiser 200 steering rack. I think the one I have pushes it a little bit more back, which doesn't allow me to have much spacing to push the lower control arms further up. Now, I could mess with the caster a little bit, but I was advised against that, and I really want to keep the caster to the OEM specs as much as possible, and the JD Fabrication kit that I run on my setup in the front is perfect for that, so there's no need for me to try to mess with the caster on it. But I believe you're still going to be required to do the same thing, which is do some cutting. So those are the kind of really your options if you are going to try to fit anything over 37s. You're going to have to do some major cutting. Now, the least popular one that still some people do run is obviously the drop bracket lifts. Those allow you up to about a 6-inch lift. To me, it's not really practical for off-roading to be up that high, but to each their own. If that's the application you want to go with, I'm pretty sure it'll work for you if you're just doing mild off-roading or whatnot. So that's one way you could do that as well. And last but not least, this one really requires a lot of modification, which is to straight axle the whole front. And usually it means having to lift up the whole thing, which means you probably need to do something with the rear with the rear end. And with that said, I mean, it's really an extensive modification, which would require you to delete your ABS and having Christmas light in your dashboard pretty much. And if that happens, I mean, good luck trying to figure out how to turn those off. I've seen a lot of problems with that, and I know there are some people who have figured out a few things on how to address that, but I'm not willing to go through that headache. And the quotes I've seen online are pretty high, up into 50K and stuff like that. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast if you want to go SAS. And obviously, as I mentioned, you have to address the rear too because of that lift that you're going to get. Unless you want to try to keep it low, which if you do, you're going to have to do a lot of extensive cutting as well. So I believe that's pretty much it. If you have any other ideas or questions, comments, concerns about ways to fit bigger tires that are at least 37s or above, please comment below, let me know. But again, I addressed the biggest issue, which is like, you hear people talk about stuffing tires just for 35s and not really talking about the front area, where even then that front area is still gonna rub, because I can tell you, before I put the 37s on, I was still rubbing quite a bit in the front there, more than I did in the rear. It wasn't so much the rear, even though I did move the caster down, and then obviously, the wheel spacing plays a big part. The scrub radius plays a big part in that rubbing. But this is the way I did it. It works for me. Take it off-roading without any type of rubbing right now, so I'll keep it at that. Maybe in the future, who knows, maybe I'll change it up and maybe go with bigger tires and see if that works for me as well, and it doesn't rub. But I'm pretty confident that where it's at right now, I could probably fit at least a 39-inch BFG KM3 tires or KO2 tires, because they're not really pure 39s. So I could probably fit 38s here without rubbing, because right now I have turned left and right, and seeing how much room I have in there in the cab mount area. At least I could judge that, and in the front as well. But I have not taken it off-road during that time, and that's really where the telltale is, when you take it off-road to see if it's rubbing. But like I said, right now I'm not rubbing with 37s. So thanks for watching this episode. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this where you can. Peace out. Thank you.